Locke spent 3 years carrying bags, cooking meals, and getting called useless by the people he loved most. His childhood friends kicked him out of their S-rank party to make room for the hero, and left him to die alone in a dungeon. But the monster they abandoned him to, it didn't kill him, it chose him.
In the border town of Grayla, every kid hits a milestone at age 12. A priest sizes you up and assigns you a job that'll define your entire life. Most kids walk out with something respectable. Locke walks out a beast tamer, wide-eyed and stunned, staring at his future like it just slapped him across the face. In a world where your class is your destiny, he just drew one of the rarest cards in the deck. The only problem? Nobody has any idea what to do with it. His childhood friends couldn't care less about the label. Emmy, a magic user, lights up the moment she hears the news, calling it cool, rare, something special. Kara, a saintess, clasps her hands together and swears she believes in him with every ounce of her tiny frame. Isaac, a gladiator with a headband and a dream, just grins and nods like it was never even a question. These 4 kids have been inseparable since before any of them knew what a dungeon was. Each of them declares their dream out loud, like a war cry. Emmy wants to be the greatest magic user alive. Isaac is gunning for the title of strongest gladiator in the world. Kara wants to become a saintess who can heal any wound, and Locke quietly says he'll be the best beast tamer there is. They slam their fists together and make a pact. They're going to become an S-rank party together, no matter what it takes. Locke didn't care what job the priest gave him. As long as he could stay beside his friends, laughing and adventuring and chasing the horizon together, the title on his stat sheet meant nothing. He decided early on that if he couldn't fight on the front lines, he'd become the backbone, the support his friends needed to reach their dreams. That promise felt unbreakable back then, forged in the golden light of childhood. 3 years pass. The scene cuts to the royal capital, Kronto, rain hammering down on cobblestone streets. A 15-year-old Locke trudges through the downpour, soaking wet, hauling a massive pack on his back. He mutters that he's finally back, catching his breath like he's been running for miles. And somewhere behind him, a voice drops like a guillotine. Let's remove Locke from the party. The party has changed. Isaac and Emmy sit in a warmly lit room, and Isaac lays it out cold. Locke is a beast tamer who hasn't tamed a single beast. All he does is carry luggage, run errands, and handle chores anyone could do. Emmy tries to push back, reminding Isaac that Locke has been trying, but Isaac cuts through the sentiment without flinching. They're an S-rank party now, and they can't afford dead weight. Isaac frames it as opportunity, not cruelty. The hero himself has expressed interest in joining their party. This is the kind of chance that comes once in a lifetime. If they build a relationship with the hero, even the king will take notice, and their village will benefit too. Emmy's face tightens, caught between loyalty and ambition, and Locke stands just outside the door, hearing every single word. The hero arrives, and he's everything Locke isn't. Flashy, confident, dripping with charisma. He introduces his sword, the dragon-slaying blade, bestowed by the king himself, supposedly capable of killing a dragon. Locke notices a small crack on the hilt, and quietly points it out, and the room goes dead silent. The hero's smile doesn't waver, but his eyes go absolutely cold. The hero snaps. He calls Locke a servant, tells him to carry his gear gently because the items inside are worth more than Locke could earn in a lifetime. Kara steps in to clarify that Locke isn't actually their servant, and the hero immediately backs off with a polished laugh. But the damage is done. Locke's role in this group just got defined by a stranger in under 30 seconds. Isaac and Emmy exchange glances. Isaac suggests Locke can at least handle scouting duties, and Kara agrees to bring her new dress into the dungeon because she'd rather Locke carry it than risk it getting stolen at the inn. Locke sighs under his breath, muttering that he's been reduced to a servant again. The party heads out the next morning toward the dungeon of the Flames of Destruction, and nobody asks Locke if he's ready. The hero joins the party and immediately starts flattering Emmy and Kara, gushing about how blessed he is to meet such beautiful and skilled ladies. Isaac watches from the side, arms crossed, visibly annoyed but keeping his mouth shut. Locke stands off to the side, completely invisible in a conversation about his own party. The dynamic has shifted, and Locke can feel every inch of the gap widening between him and everyone else. Locke knows something the others don't. As a beast tamer, his skills include support magic, equipment enchantment, and the ability to raise his allies' base strength. He handled cooking, carried everyone's luggage, scouted for enemies, and even tanked damage when needed. But none of that ever felt like enough, because without a tamed beast, the title of Beast Tamer is just an empty label. The dungeon looms ahead, a gaping maw of stone and darkness called the Dungeon of the Flames of Destruction. Locke walks slowly, reading a map and using his skill, Monster Radar, to track every creature lurking in the tunnels. His radar lets him estimate the number and location of monsters, and combined with the map, he can chart paths that dramatically lower the chance of encounters. The fastest route isn't always the safest, and Locke knows that better than anyone. The hero doesn't see it that way. He demands to know why Locke is walking so slowly, barking at him to pick up the pace and stop wasting time. Locke tries to explain, but Isaac backs the hero up. If they're too slow, more monsters will gather ahead of them. Nobody wants to hear about safe routes or careful planning when there's a boss waiting at the end of the tunnel. Locke snaps back with his reasoning. He tells them he's explained this before. He was sure the party would prefer to avoid unnecessary monster encounters and take safer detours. But the hero isn't interested in detours. He grabs Locke by the collar and demands to be taken to the boss faster, his voice dripping with frustration. Locke stares back at him, and for the first time, something in his expression goes flat. Emmy steps in with a warning that cuts deeper than any insult. She tells Locke this isn't a game. If he keeps this up, even she won't be able to protect him. Locke's face falls. The one person he thought still saw him differently just drew the same line as everyone else. He realizes, standing in that dark tunnel, that he's lost their trust completely, and he can't even pinpoint when it happened. The party presses deeper, and the hero discovers something that makes everything worse. He accuses Locke of not actually leading them on the shortest route to the boss. The entire group turns on Locke at once. Isaac calls him an idiot. Emmy says he can't read the mood, and even Kara goes quiet. Locke absorbs it all without a word, his face hidden in shadow. Locke finally says 2 words. I got it. No fight, no explanation, no defense. Emmy asks if everyone is ready to enter, calling out to Kara specifically, and the group reforms around the dungeon's inner gate. The hero steps forward with a smirk, and Locke falls into step behind them all, carrying everyone's gear on his back like he always has. But something is different this time. Locke's eyes aren't defeated. They're resolved. He confirms that Emmy and the others have agreed to proceed, and the party stands at the entrance to what feels like the final stretch. The tension between Locke and the rest of the group has reached a breaking point, and everyone can feel it. Whatever happens next, there's no going back to how things were. The party puts their hands together one last time, all 5 of them, including Locke. Someone declares they're the #1 party as their fists meet in the center, a burst of energy radiating outward in classic shonen style. But Locke's hand is in that circle too, gripping just as tight as everyone else's. Whether they want him there or not, he's not leaving. Not yet, not like this, and definitely not without showing them exactly what a beast tamer can do. The dungeon boss fight goes sideways before it even starts. The party reaches the final floor, and standing before them is no ordinary gray wolf. It's a Fenrir, a legendary monster that even S-rank adventurers can't take down easily. Locke immediately recognizes the silver fur and tries to warn the group, but the hero waves it off, calling it just a gray wolf and a letdown. He raises his sword and charges in, dragging Isaac with him. The Fenrir doesn't appreciate the wake-up call. It unleashes a wave of pressure so intense that Kara gets hit with a fear status ailment before anyone even swings a blade. Emmy screams for Isaac to retreat, and the hero suddenly reveals a critical problem. His dragon-slaying blade, the one bestowed by the king himself, has shattered. Without a sword, even the mighty hero is completely useless, and the entire party starts running for their lives. Isaac calls the retreat, and the group bolts through the dungeon corridors with the Fenrir growling behind them. Emmy mocks Locke on the way out, telling him he's so good at running away that it makes her want to throw up. Locke doesn't respond. He just happened to be at the front because that's where the expendable one always ends up. The insult barely registers anymore against the backdrop of near death. The hero wastes no time showing his true colors once they're safe. He announces he's taking the spare sword and the king's broken blade, and tells Locke the rest of the luggage is his, to carry on his way to hell. The hero officially joins the party, asking Isaac to confirm his spot, and Isaac responds with a cold, satisfied grin. Locke watches from the ground, stunned, as the last shreds of his place in this group get handed to someone who ran from the very first fight. Memories flood in like a cruel joke. Locke remembers Isaac telling him the team is complete with him around, Kara asking Locke to protect her, Emmy thanking him, and saying they'll get stronger together. Those warm, bright faces from the past overlap with the cold reality of the present, and Locke laughs bitterly to himself. He mutters that something must be wrong with him for still caring about people who just left him for dead. The Fenrir finds him. Locke sits alone on the dungeon floor, abandoned by his party, when the massive silver wolf approaches with a grim observation. What cruel creatures humans are. It notes that Locke's companions sacrificed one of their own to save themselves, and promises that his death will be swift and painless. Locke looks up at the beast, and instead of terror, something entirely unexpected flashes across his face. Locke can hear the Fenrir's words inside his head. He realizes with a jolt that this might be one of the skills he possesses as a beast tamer, the ability to understand and communicate with monsters. The Fenrir is intrigued, noting that this seems to be the case, and casually offers to fight him since it's bored and trapped on this floor anyway. Locke frantically waves his hands and begs the wolf to please just let him go. The wolf explains its situation. There's a powerful barrier sealing the entrance to this floor, one so strong that even a Fenrir can't break through it. Locke asks about it, and the wolf confirms it's been stuck here with nothing to do. Locke's mind starts turning, and he makes a proposition. What if he could get the Fenrir out of this dungeon? The wolf's ears perk up, and Locke asks the question that changes everything. Locke looks the Fenrir dead in the eyes, and asks if it will go on an adventure with him. The wolf stares at him for a long, silent moment, then lets out a soft laugh. Calling it a good joke, Locke chuckles nervously, but the Fenrir's expression shifts, and it says it's not actually against the idea. Locke's eyes go wide as the wolf confirms that Fenrirs don't lie, and the realization hits him like a freight train. A voice echoes in Locke's mind. A Fenrir wants to become your friend. Will you befriend it? Locke remembers reading about this exact moment in books about the beast tamer profession, how a voice would appear in your head when a monster wanted to bond with you. He also recalls that befriending a monster was supposed to trigger a transformation in the tamer. Without hesitation, he accepts, and the bond locks into place. The system confirms it. The Fenrir has become Locke's friend. He's been granted access to the mini-monster garden, and his monsters can now transform. Locke's body surges with energy he's never felt before, and he can barely process the flood of new information pouring into his mind. The Fenrir bounces around excitedly in a comically tiny form, and Locke decides to name it Lucky. The wolf loves the name, and Locke realizes that befriending a Fenrir counts as the equivalent of defeating a dungeon boss. A treasure chest materializes out of thin air, and inside Locke finds a bracelet and a collar. Lucky immediately demands the red collar, practically vibrating with excitement, and Locke straps the mini-monster garden bracelet onto his wrist. A voice announces that the bracelet has been equipped, and that Locke can now enter or leave the garden whenever he wishes. Lucky prances around in its new collar, while Locke stares at his wrist, barely believing any of this is real. Locke and Lucky don't waste any time exploring their new dynamic. Lucky smashes through a group of monsters in the dungeon like they're nothing, and Locke excitedly explains that monster corpses can be sold for good money and even used to make delicious food. Lucky is immediately on board the moment food gets mentioned. Locke discovers he can store items by riding on Lucky's back, and the wolf is genuinely amazed. It had no idea that was even possible. Lucky tears through the dungeon at full speed with Locke riding on its back, covering in minutes what took the party hours on foot. Locke grins and thanks Lucky, confirming that this kind of speed is exactly what you'd expect from a Fenrir. They're approaching the barrier that leads to the staircase out, and Locke is already calculating. At this rate, they'll escape the dungeon floor and reach the surface in no time. Locke steps outside and breathes fresh air for the first time since being abandoned. He figures the other S-rank adventurers have probably finished the dungeon by now, and Lucky asks what they're going to do next. Locke looks out at the open sky and says he wants to gather more monsters like Lucky, building a real beast tamers party. Lucky confirms that there will be others trapped in dungeons who'd want to escape too, and for the first time, Locke has a plan that's entirely his own. They try to enter the mini-monster garden together, and something goes hilariously wrong. Lucky crashes headfirst into the ground after a barrier zaps it. Locke rushes over asking if the wolf is okay, and Lucky shakes it off with its tongue out, clearly more embarrassed than hurt. Locke realizes he needs to try entering himself, and the moment he steps through, the world goes dark. Then a blade of light cuts across the panel. Inside the garden, Locke finds a massive treasure chest. He opens it to discover the bracelet and collar were just the beginning. The mini-monster garden is a full pocket dimension with items, space, and secrets waiting to be uncovered. Lucky immediately starts bouncing around the garden in chibi form, delighted by the new space. Locke clips the bracelet on and feels the garden sync with him, realizing this is going to change everything about how he operates. Locke teaches Lucky about collecting monster materials, explaining the value of careful harvesting. Lucky whimpers at first, not understanding why Locke is being so gentle with dead monsters, but quickly gets on board when Locke mentions the food angle again. The two of them settle into a rhythm: fight, collect, store. And Locke realizes that all those years of doing thankless grunt work for his party actually taught him exactly the skills he needs now. They ride Lucky through the dungeon tunnels toward the exit, and Locke marvels at how the same distance that took his old party an entire day is being covered in what feels like minutes. He thanks Lucky sincerely, and the Fenrir tells him to hold on tight as they round the final corner toward daylight. Locke smiles, a real, unguarded smile, and says the staircase will lead them out of here and into whatever comes next. Even though his childhood friends abandoned him in the jaws of a legendary monster, even though he was mocked and discarded and left to die alone in the dark, Locke can't bring himself to hate them. The Fenrir's massive jaws hover inches from his face as he sits on the dungeon floor, tears streaming down his cheeks, and he says the words that define who he is. He never had real bonds with his childhood friends from the very beginning, but even so, forced into this impossible situation, he just can't bear a grudge against them. The memories of Emmy's encouragement, Kara's belief, and Isaac's camaraderie flash one final time as Locke sits in the belly of the dungeon with a Fenrir as his only companion. Something in him has broken, but something else has been born. A beast tamer who finally tamed his first beast. A boy who chose kindness over bitterness even when the world gave him every reason to choose rage. Lucky stands beside him in the fading light, and together they walk toward a future that belongs to no one but them. Locke and Lucky stand before the dungeon's barrier, the same impenetrable wall that kept the Fenrir trapped for who knows how long. Lucky tells Locke not to give up, and suggests a plan. If Locke stores Lucky inside the mini-monster garden bracelet, they might be able to bypass the barrier entirely, since only Locke would physically pass through it. It's a gamble. The barrier is incredibly strong, and there's no guarantee it'll work. Locke clenches the bracelet, says, "Let's go," and walks straight into the shimmering wall. The barrier crackles and strains as Locke pushes through, but it holds against him. Or rather, it doesn't hold against him at all. He passes through cleanly, and on the other side, sunlight hits his face for the first time in what feels like forever. Lucky materializes beside him, marveling that it never imagined there'd be a way out of that dungeon. The Fenrir turns to Locke with something like reverence and says it's truly grateful, and that it looks forward to the journey ahead. Locke reaches the surface and immediately heads toward the Adventurers Guild in the royal capital. Lucky trots beside him in full Fenrir form, and the townspeople lose their minds, screaming about a massive gray wolf appearing near the guild. Guards draw their weapons and surround them before Locke can even open his mouth. He tries desperately to explain that Lucky is his familiar, but nobody is listening to the kid standing next to a legendary predator. The guild receptionist Rika steps outside with a calm smile, takes one look at the chaos, and immediately understands the situation. She welcomes Locke back and notices he's not with his usual party. Locke introduces Lucky as his familiar Fenrir, and Rika's rabbit ears twitch as she processes the information. A beast tamer who actually tamed a Fenrir. The crowd goes silent, the guards lower their weapons, and Rika tells Locke he needs to register Lucky officially right away. Locke walks Lucky through the registration process, and Lucky yawns through the whole thing with the casual boredom of an apex predator doing paperwork. Rika congratulates Locke, telling him she's so happy he can finally work as a real beast tamer. Locke stands there, stunned. He hadn't realized anyone at the guild even noticed him before, let alone cared. For the first time in his adventuring career, someone is celebrating him, not tolerating him. Locke sits down with Rika at the guild, and the truth starts pouring out. He admits he was fired from the party shortly after entering the dungeon, and that the work he did could have been done by anyone. Rika cuts him off immediately. She was certain Locke was the most essential member of the party. Locke stares at her in disbelief, unable to comprehend how the guild receptionist saw what his own childhood friends couldn't. Rika drops a bombshell that changes everything. She explains that because Locke was present, the Grayla party was able to become S rank in under 3 years. His beast tamer skill, Divine Protection, passively boosted his allies' base abilities, enhanced their weapon durability, and kept their equipment in pristine condition the entire time. Nobody in the party, not Isaac, not Emmy, not Kara, ever realized they were benefiting from Locke's power every single day. The revelation hits even harder when Rika delivers the consequence. Without Locke, the Grayla party will be demoted to below B rank. Their strength, their reputation, all of it was built on a foundation they just threw away. Locke can barely process it. The guy they called useless, the servant who carried their luggage, was the invisible engine behind their entire rise to the top, and none of them ever said thank you. Meanwhile, back in the dungeon of the Flames of Destruction, the party formerly known as the #1 team is falling apart at the seams. They're on the 5th floor with no map, no navigator, and no idea which route to take. The hero screams at Isaac and the others for not remembering the path, and Kara quietly realizes that they always had Locke to guide them through dungeons. They never needed to remember anything because he handled all of it. The hero's shorter route has led them straight into an endless gauntlet of monster hordes. Isaac charges in bragging about being a hero-class adventurer, but the hero fires back telling him to shut up and stop complaining. They came in from the 10th floor. The monsters aren't getting weaker as they descend. They're getting stronger, which goes against everything the hero claimed would happen. Isaac screams for a plan, and nobody has one. The party takes a desperate rest break, and the hero notices something unsettling. Isaac's spare sword is still in perfect condition despite constant use, and the hero demands to know how that's possible. Isaac has no answer. He never thought about it before. His weapons just never seemed to break. The realization starts creeping in like cold water. Locke's divine protection was maintaining their equipment this entire time, and they never once noticed. The hero turns on the party with a vicious grin. He calls them useless fools, says he regrets teaming up with them, and declares he'll never work with them again. Emmy fires back that the hero isn't even as strong as he claimed, but the damage is done. The cracks in this group have become canyons. The man who was supposed to replace Locke has proven to be nothing but arrogance wrapped in shattered steel. Meanwhile, back at the guild, Rika shares what she knows about the hero's recent history. After leaving Locke's party, he joined a B-rank group and challenged the Dungeon of the Flames of Destruction again, and it ended in disaster. The only ones who made it out were the hero and one other person. Rumors spread that the hero used his own party members as decoys to escape, and Locke's blood runs cold hearing it. Locke asks why he was targeted. Why was he the one left behind to die? He answers his own question before Rika can respond, saying it was probably because he was the least useful member. Rika's expression tightens, and she tells him that's not true at all. But Locke has internalized 3 years of being told he's worthless, and one conversation isn't enough to undo that kind of damage, even when the proof is sitting right in front of him. Back in the dungeon, the hero reveals the full depth of his depravity. On the 4th floor, surrounded by monsters, he turns his blade on Kara, his own party member, and cuts her down without hesitation. Isaac screams, demanding to know why, and the hero calmly explains that a sacrifice was needed for the rest of them to survive. He tells the group they're all accomplices now, since they're still in a dungeon and no one will ever find out. Kara lies bleeding on the dungeon floor, her staff shattered beside her. The hero looks down at her with cold eyes and thanks her for the healing earlier, then adds that they don't need her anymore. He tells her she should be glad. She'll act as a decoy while they escape. Kara's hand reaches out, trembling, as the footsteps of her childhood friends grow fainter, and she begs them not to abandon her. Isaac's flashback hits him all at once. Memories of training with Locke as children, of their village elder praising Locke's diligence and telling Isaac to be more like him. Emmy remembers how Locke was always there, map in hand, guiding them, planning their routes, handling every unglamorous task without complaint. Isaac clenches his fist so hard his nails draw blood, and the truth he refused to accept finally breaks through. Locke was the reason they got this far. Emmy confronts the hero's claim about being accomplices, shouting that abandoning someone who benefited the party is enough to prove their motive. The hero sneers and calls her weak, not even as strong as she claims to be. Zuza, another party member, tells the hero to shut up, but the hero has already checked out. He walks away through the dungeon corridor, leaving behind a trail of broken trust and shattered friendships. Lucky watches Locke carefully as they walk through the royal capital together, children playing nearby, the world carrying on as if nothing happened. The Fenrir speaks quietly. It warns Locke that people who have betrayed him once will do it again. Locke stops walking, and his expression shifts to something hard but not bitter. He tells Lucky he understands, and that this will be the last time he helps them. Locke looks up at the sky with Lucky beside him, and for the first time, there's steel in his eyes instead of sadness. The boy who spent 3 years being invisible has a legendary Fenrir at his side, a guild receptionist who believes in him, and a future that doesn't depend on people who never deserved his loyalty. Lucky presses its massive head against Locke's shoulder, and somewhere in the distance, a party that threw away its greatest asset is learning exactly what it cost them. Locke heads back into the dungeon of the Flames of Destruction with Lucky at his side, and this time, everything is different. They tear through orange ants together, and Lucky compliments Locke's movement during the fight, saying it was genuinely impressive. Locke grins and admits it's the first time he's ever fought like this, side by side with a partner who actually wants him there. The boy who was never allowed to swing a sword is finally learning what it feels like to matter in a battle. After the fight, the voice in Locke's head returns. The young orange ants want to befriend him. Locke hesitates, considering they just killed a bunch of adult orange ants moments ago. But the orphaned babies have nowhere else to go. He decides he'd feel terrible leaving them alone in the dungeon, so he accepts them all. It's a small, quiet moment, but it says everything about who Locke is. The guy who can't stop caring, even when the world gives him every excuse to stop. The orange ants hatch from their eggs and immediately transform into tiny humanoid girls who latch onto Locke screaming, "Papa!" Lucky watches with bewildered amusement as Locke gets swarmed by his new ant daughters, each one bouncing around and calling for his attention. Lucky accuses Locke of delaying their trip back to town because he knew there'd be women outside, and Locke has absolutely no idea what the Fenrir is talking about. His family just got a lot bigger whether he was ready or not. The mini-monster garden gets its first real upgrade. Locke enters the pocket dimension and discovers it's expanded dramatically. There's now a hut, a vegetable field, fruit trees, a pond, a river, a mine, a mountain, and even a small sea. The system announces that since he's befriended 6 new monsters, he can choose 6 features to improve. Locke stares at the sprawling landscape and the upgrade menu, overwhelmed by another new feature he didn't know existed. The orange ant girls have already made themselves at home, sorting through monster materials on a tree stump like tiny industrious workers. One of them wears a tiara and seems different from the others. Locke wonders if she might be a special breed. She asks if she's a good girl, and Locke pats her head and tells her, of course she is. Being called Papa isn't so bad after all, and for the first time in a long time, Locke has people, well, monsters, who genuinely look up to him. Locke asks Lucky to carry Kara on its back for the trip to town. Lucky agrees, but makes it clear this is a one-time exception. It only really lends its back to Locke. Locke thanks the Fenrir with a bright smile, and Lucky internally notes it didn't expect him to say something so cute. The dynamic between these two keeps deepening with every interaction, built on mutual respect instead of the one-sided servitude Locke endured for 3 years. Kara wakes up on the dungeon floor and thinks she's dead. She sees Locke standing over her and assumes she must be in heaven, asking why he's there too. Locke tells her she's alive, barely, and that there's a more important problem to deal with now. Kara's eyes fill with tears as she apologizes for leaving him behind, saying she knows she can't change what happened. Locke cuts her off gently, telling her that's not what matters right now. Locke kneels beside Kara, apologizing that he didn't make it in time to prevent her injuries. He explains that thanks to her, thanks to the recovery potions she once taught him to make, he was able to brew the medicine that saved her life. Kara breaks down completely, telling Locke that she's the one who should be grateful for him. Locke grips her hand, tears streaming down his own face, and for one raw moment, the weight of everything that happened between them crashes through. A memory surfaces. Kara as a young girl in her Saintess outfit, shyly showing Locke a potion she made and asking what he thinks. Locke told her it was amazing, an excellent recovery potion, and that everyone would be surprised. Kara beamed and said it was because Locke helped her make it. That warmth, that simple gratitude between childhood friends. It was real once, and Locke is holding on to the last thread of it now as he carries her broken body towards safety. Locke and Lucky run into the hero's group deep in the dungeon, and the encounter goes exactly as badly as you'd expect. The hero takes one look at Locke riding a Fenrir and immediately calculates that as long as they're in a dungeon, no one will find out who they killed. He casually asks if they should just murder Locke and Lucky right there. Isaac calls out to Locke, begging him to save Kara, and Lucky snarls, calling them scum for betraying Locke and still daring to ask for help. The hero hasn't reflected on anything. He repeats his same cold logic. A sacrifice was needed to ensure survival. He had no choice. Lucky is disgusted, growling that they haven't learned a single thing from what they've done. Locke stares at his former party members and his former friends, and after a long, heavy silence, he turns to Lucky and says 2 words. Let's go! They leave the hero's group standing in the dark, and this time, Locke is the one walking away. Locke learns that Kara is still on the 5th floor. The hero and Isaac left her there after cutting her down. His expression hardens instantly, the soft-hearted beast tamer replaced by something colder and more determined. He asks point blank if they did the same thing to Kara that they did to him, and the silence from Isaac and Emmy is louder than any confession. Locke turns Lucky around and rides back into the dungeon without another word. Meanwhile, Isaac and Emmy's situation gets worse by the second. The blue ants on the 4th floor, monsters that were supposedly weak, are now completely unaffected by Isaac's attacks. He screams in frustration, wondering why they were never this hard before, and the answer echoes in his mind like a haunting refrain: Locke's divine protection. The flashback to Rika's words plays over his face. They were relying on Locke's power all this time, and never once felt gratitude. Isaac slams his blade against another ant, and it bounces off like hitting steel. The monsters that used to fall in one hit now swarm the corridor, and Isaac can barely keep his footing. Emmy's words from the guild ring through his skull. Without Locke, they're effectively a C-rank party. The dungeon that was supposed to be their proving ground has become their tomb, and the person who could have saved them is the one they threw away. Lucky whines as all the orange ant eggs they collected have hatched, leaving nothing left to eat. Locke looks at the massive Fenrir pouting over lost snacks and can't help but laugh. Somehow, that silly disappointment makes him feel a little bit better about everything. He promises Lucky something delicious once all of this is over, and Lucky perks up immediately with an excited yelp. Even at the edge of darkness, these two find ways to make each other smile, and that might be the most powerful thing in this entire story.